Astrology is that science which studies the relationship between man and cosmos, his celestial surroundings. Actually, the term to use is Jyotisha, and Jyotisha is derived from the term Jyoti, which means light. Therefore, astrology throws light on areas of life to which you do not have access otherwise. Now, Jyoti being light, I repeat, light is radiation. Therefore, astrology is the study of celestial radiation and its impact on human affairs. See, the Brihat Parashara Hora is the most authoritative work on the subject. It is a dialogue between the master Parashara and the disciple Maitreya. And in chapter 1 itself, Maitreya is asking Parashara, like there are so many celestial bodies orbiting the skies. What is the connection between these celestial bodies and life on earth? He is very specific, saying life on earth. So, it is basically the study of the connection between planetary movements and human affairs. He does not use the word cause and effect. How do the planets influence? Atara kelodilla. He is very clear. He says, what is the connection or correspondence between the celestial bodies in the sky and terrestrial affairs?
So, how will astrology important for human being? Because however it is going to affect us all the life. So, what is the importance of knowing Jyotishya or knowing reading horoscope?
The birth chart, which is one part of the total body of knowledge known as Jyotisha, is like a road map. The road map may not give you all the clear details of whatever lies ahead, but it gives you a general picture of what lies ahead, and using that you can make decisions to help improve the quality of your life.
If you can throw an example on this, one or two examples, it can be marriage, it can be career.
Marriage, yes, it's very important in terms of marriage or choosing a career for your child. The planetary positions in the horoscope will give an indication of which career is suited best for you. For example, if watery signs are very prominent, in astrology we start with definitions, and watery signs is one of the words used constantly in astrology. So, if watery signs are dominant in the horoscope, then one is, better equipped to study life sciences, including medicine. If fiery signs are on, then computer and related information technology, such subjects will be suitable for one. So, at the stage when a child reaches the 10th or 11th standard and has to take a decision, the chart comes in very helpful. And also, because it is the fashion to go into medicine or whatever, if you push the child into it and the child has no aptitude for it according to his birth horoscope, then he is going to get very frustrated, and he may not succeed in his academic career. Coming to marriage, so many marriages break up for very silly reasons often now, and especially amongst corporates this is becoming very common. When you match two charts for marriage, we are not looking for the perfect match. What we are doing is ensuring a fair degree of harmony and stability of the marriage. Stability of the marriage is important because in the Indian social structure, the family is the unit of society, not the individual as in Western societies. So, breakup of families can be disastrous for future generations. So, using horoscopic matching will help you avoid such calamities.
In Bharatiya philosophy, we are following karma siddhanta. We have accepted it. So when we get all the fruits and sorrows according to our karma, how jataka of someone or the jyotishya will help to tackle the karma benefits or karma phala?
Actually, astrology is basically based on the law of karma and the theory of rebirth.
Okay.
And it is here that I should like to point out, the planets are not influencing your life.
Okay.
The planets are throwing a script which you can decipher through astrological rules that tell you about what is in store for you, what karma is in store for you. And if you go to the karma theory, of course, it's very deep. You have Druda karma and Adruda karma. Druda karma is like non-compoundable offenses. If somebody is murdered, then the accused cannot go and say, give him money and say, well, let's not go to court and let's wind up the matter here. That come under Druda Karma, the results of which, over which you have no control.
Okay. Compulsory when
You have to experience the results.
Okay.
And Adruda Karma are like compoundable offences. If you borrow money from a friend and he goes to court, you can still settle it out of court also.
Okay.
Likewise, when when a certain indication is the result of an Adruda Karma, then you can look at various means to handle it, alter it, qualify it, or make it stretch it over a longer period of time, so that the impact or the sting of the karma is not too severe.
Is it possible to change the future?
It depends on how your chart is placed. If in astrological terms the chart is strong, then you will have the wherewithal, psychological and mental, intellectual, to go to get yourself a good life. If the chart is very weak, and especially if the moon, who is known as Manahkaraka or the ruler of the mind, is weak, you make wrong decisions all the time and get into trouble.
So all these planets will affect not only human but also all life.
All life forms.
Okay. So we have scientific research on this. We have Jyotishya Shastra. We have astrology. We will come over the difficulties. But what about how will other life they will take it?
Other life forms, they have no control. No? They don't have an intellect or the reasoning power, but they have a mind, and their mind can suffer. Like, when a dog, it sees its own puppy falling into a drain, you can see it is very disturbed. So because the reasoning power is not there, the intellect is not there in animals, they just have to flow with the karma and flow along the tide.
Today there are a lot of astrologers who sits by roadside. So what exactly is it okay to take it as a profession, astrology as a profession, or it is a very divine practice that should be kept as divine?
It is not, I wouldn't put it as a divine practice or anything. But in all professions you have to maintain a certain level of ethics, ethical conduct. Likewise in astrology. But once you have studied the subject properly and thoroughly under a good master or through books, then you can gradually move into practicing astrology. And with good results you can help the clients very much.
When we speak of astrological impact, for example, I remember during my days having read Raman sir's analysis of Hitler, how he predicted World War II, and how he also predicted the end of the way it would end, about Hitler and the World War II. What are the implication for mundane astrology? One, you spoke of the individual thing, we'll come back to that a bit later, but mundane astrology, as your annual numbers do show, has a very profound impact on the larger population, not individuals.
Yeah.
So there we would want you to shed some more light.
See, basically your question is what is the content of Jyotisha? Because most of us think Jyotisha is limited to matching horoscopes and finding muhurtas for certain occasions. According to classical works, Siddhanta Samhita Hora Rupam Skandatrayatmakam Vedasya Nirmalam Chakshuhu Jyotish Shastram Anuttamam. That is, Jyotisha has three branches: Siddhanta, which is Ganita, mathematics, and Gola or spherical astronomy. Then the second branch is Samhita, where once you get to know all about the planetary positions and what happens in the sky, what is the use of that? One is knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but it also has its practical application. The other two branches, they show you how to apply astrology practically. The second branch, therefore, is Samhita. It deals with planetary positions and the connections of these planetary positions with terrestrial life, but as relevant to large geographical areas or large groups of people or collective destinies, or in other words, that is what is known as mundane astrology. It relates to national and international affairs, weather forecasting, natural disaster forecasting, terrorist attacks. All of that comes under the second branch known as Samhita. And the last branch is Hora, which is subdivided into Jataka, Prashna and Muhurta. Jataka is based on, Hora is predictive astrology. Jataka is based on the time of birth and refers to individuals. Then Prashna is based on the question time, and the last muhurta is a segment of time so chosen that it fits well with good planetary parameters. These form the content of Jyotisha. That way, at a level of collective destinies, where natural disasters come in, national and international affairs also come in, Jyotisha can be a very good guide to ruling political figures. For example, the September 11th, 2001 bombing of the World Trade Centers, it was anticipated almost 9 or 10 months before in our magazine, based on the positions of Mars and Rahu. Mars and Rahu were supposed to move into an opposition on 13th September 2001. And this incident occurred on the previous Tuesday, 11th September 2001. That is, these planetary positions, of course, were in relation to the Americans' Declaration of Independence horoscope. So they could have taken precautions if they had paid some attention to astrological, forewarnings. But of course, nobody cares for all that. No, at least then they never used to care. But now I think there is more growing interest, academic interest in astrology as a guide to making major political and other decisions. So likewise, the Bhuj earthquake in 2001 on January 26th, Saturn and Jupiter, two major planets as defined in astrology, they turn from retrograde to direct motion, which is a very rare phenomenon in astronomy. And also the previous solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse, the path of the eclipse lay across Bhuj, and that is where the earthquake struck. If the seismology department had taken some note of the astrological forewarning, maybe the devastation and deaths could have been reduced. In such cases, you cannot prevent, because all that is part of Druda karma. Collective karma bringing about collective events which affect collective lives. So that way, it can be of very great help.
Absolutely. In that case, as a country and its policies, today we are looking at a lot of Indic knowledge systems, trying to bring the Indic knowledge system into the current practice. As you rightly pointed out, how can astrology be institutionalized in today's research, policy making, and decision making? For instance, you spoke of seismology. For instance, you spoke of defense, terrorism, national security, so on and so forth, or even health, for that matter, pandemics, or so on and so forth. To what extent and how can the government look at institutionalizing astrology into its research process?
First of all, it has to introduce the subject in the colleges, in the university curricula, where the students are taught the subject in a systematic manner. And once they are through the course, then they have to work at higher levels of the subject, and then form teams. On a national scale, you cannot have one individual doing all the work, like now it's happening almost. So these teams, they will also take the help of seismologists, past occurrence of earthquakes, and work out the data, planetary data on those dates, and they will come up with some conclusions, some planetary pattern. And again, when that planetary pattern is due to recur, they can give you a warning of the possibility of an earthquake or other major natural disaster. So that way it can be made use of, but the most important thing is it has to be brought into the academic life of the country.
How confident are you that it can be brought in, and today's youth or young generation would seriously consider taking this as a knowledge, as a subject for their studies?
It can be brought about, but there is a lot of resistance from certain sections of the scientific community. They make up their own definition of astrology and then try to prove that wrong. What has that to do with astrology? For example, you may have heard of, I don't want to give the name, Bombay Atomic Research Center scientist. And he came up with the study results of a certain number of pairs of couples. Those couples, one group, they were married on the basis of sun sign matching. And one group, they were married on other considerations, no astrology in the picture, is what he said. Then he said, what the results showed that the frequency of breakup of marriage in both groups was the same. So he said astrology is not science. First of all, he was not qualified to say anything about astrology, though he held a high post in the Bombay Atomic Research Center, because he had not studied even the definitions of astrology. That is, in any subject, chapter 1 is devoted to definitions in physics, chemistry and all. In school we learn, that is how we learn the subjects. Secondly, what he was saying is, he made up his own rule of astrology and proved it wrong. Nowhere in astrology are sun signs given that importance, and matching of charts is not as simple as that. You have to go through several parameters. So, this is the kind of bias and prejudice against astrology from certain sections of officially designated scientists, which is coming in the way of its entering university curricula.
In which case, in a way, the onus of ensuring that astrology gets a respectable position today, notwithstanding some of the belligerent attitude of the so-called scientists, is on the astrological community. When I say that, maybe pick up one or two niche areas, a team of, if we may not have thousands of people, but at least a few dozens, sit together, address a problem, and show it as a pilot or a proof of concept at the country level. We have seen individually a lot of brilliant predictions have come true, but to institutionalize it, where you may not necessarily have everyone being as brilliant as some of the top-notch astrologers are, that will help in getting a sense of comfort to the government that as a process people can come together, form research and advise the government. Is that a doable suggestion, madam? In areas like, for instance, recently we have come through the pandemic, so in which case what could have been done or what can be done even now for example?
For that, they have to take the help of other experts, experts in other fields also, like the medical community and related sectors of thinkers. We can only point out the possible time and the possibility of an event occurring. And the remedial measure is for these people to take note of the timing and take precautionary measures well in time.
Okay. One question I wanted to ask, a bit related, not directly related to astrology, but the women in astrology. I mean, generally, as it is, few people pick up astrology as a lifetime dedication, of which women are further fewer, very, very few. So, you being one of the foremost of such people, what are your views on this? The challenges, the landscape for a woman astrologer?
It is the same as for men astrologers also. Like whether a doctor is a lady or a gentleman, all the challenges are the same. The same in the case of women astrologers also. But now lots of women are also moving into studying astrology academically, and they come from very good professional and academic backgrounds. So I think the movement is building, but only the government should have the will to make it official.
In the common language, for example, people consider astrology with palm reading, face reading, so on and so forth. The common man may not necessarily have the intellectual understanding of astrology, as you rightly pointed out. He or she is in a problem. They want a solution, right? They seek a solution and go into a place which says we can read palms, we can read faces. So, how is it that different from the astrology that you've been speaking of?
See, as I said, astrology is the study of celestial bodies and their connection with terrestrial affairs. So, palm reading and face reading and all, they don't come under the definition of astrology at all. Now, these are all venues for, at a certain level, professions for their livelihoods in many cases. Nothing wrong in that. But then people are not, properly given the definition of astrology right from the beginning. When we go to school, in the initial stages when we are introduced to physics, chemistry and all, the teachers, refer to Einstein, Newton and others with great respect. And let us ask, what about astrology, ma'am? Oh, that is superstition, don't talk about it, is what they say. And impressions, the first impressions, they stay in your mind permanently, almost permanently. So most children are, that way misled into believing that astrology is not science. Basically, astrology is the study of time. It is also known as Kalagnana and Kalavidana. You know, time, it is in time that creation begins, sustains and dissolves. And we all live in time. But at this point, I'd like to make a small digression. Now, the tools of the scientist are the panchendriyas or the five sense organs and the intellect. That is the mouth, ears, nose, skin. So, these are the instruments of the scientist. But what happens is, if astrology is the study of time as defined by planetary parameters, can you feel time? Can you see time? Can you touch time? Can you smell time or taste time? You can't. For that reason, you can't dismiss a factor of time, because it is time. In time, we all live and finally exit also. So, astrology is the only science which helps you understand the quality of time. And when I talk of quality of time, as I said, these examples at World Trade Center and the other Bhuj earthquake and the Mumbai operations, quite about 10 years back, when terrorists took control of Bombay, all of these, are based on planetary parameters which define the obstructive nature of the time at that time. So many a time we say, oh, nanak time chennagilla, when you are frustrated. Actually, that is a very scientific statement, and it occurs only in India and some Eastern cultures. It is not known in Western cultures, because when you say nan time chenagilla, actually you are being very scientific, because each moment of time has its own qualities, and these moments of time are defined by planetary factors. We all know about quantification of time, dividing time into minutes, seconds, weeks, days and decades and so on. But qualifying time is the unique knowledge of ancient India.
Okay.
So, this is how astrology has to be understood and approached.
Speaking of time, there are certain questions. Of course, it might be a bit more academically involved, but the point that we would want to ask is a typical question is raised with respect to twins. There are certain identical twins or non-identical twins, almost born a few minutes or seconds apart, but at times they have a similar trajectory of life, and many times they have completely different trajectories of life. So then, how is it that when the differences can be so minute in 2 minutes and 5 minutes, is there a possibility or is there not a possibility that we take someone's time as, let's say, 3:30 while it could be 3:40, and the time itself could be totally different? So foundation itself is not very stable.
Yeah, that is why to check on the correctness of the time, it is good to always take some initial information from the person coming to you and check the correctness of the chart against that information, especially physical appearance and maybe a few other factors of a general nature. Then you can shift the ascendant appropriately and come up with the correct chart. When it comes to twins, it's a little tricky area. So, actually, each sign has 30 degrees, and 30 degrees are divided into 150 segments, each known as a Nadi Amsha. And each of these Nadi Amshas has an Uttara Bhaga and Purva Bhaga. And each of these Uttara Bhaga and Purva Bhaga sections equal 24 seconds. So, if the birth time differs by 24 seconds, the life pattern of an individual can also differ. So, that to some extent helps understand twins' birth. But in this area also we are still to learn a lot. I am not saying we reach the end of knowledge, we are still working on it, but it does give very good clues.
How do you see this Semitic religion and is the impact of them on society in long term, 100 years, 200 years? What will be our cultural status in next 100 year, 200 year, 300 year? What would be the position?
See, astrology is a science that relates to life on earth.
Okay.
So, it does not take note of community, caste, religion or anything. All the rules apply equally well to people coming under different denominations, divisions, communities, etc. And really, if you are asking about the future of India, I can only say sooner or later India will be a superpower, because the planetary position at the time it got independence are such that there is Rahu in Taurus in Lagna, and Rahu is exalted, and Rahu exalted can give very good results. So if we have to wait for some more years, but there's no doubt about India emerging as a superpower.
So you mentioned about the Independence Day of Bharat. So democracy is a new baby for us. We are all experiencing it is very new thing for us. Will democracy sustain, or when Bharat become a superpower, we will come under the same democratic umbrella, or we will have some other setup?
No, democracy is not new to India. It has always been there. Politicians are not democratic. That is the problem here.
So this democracy will sustain.
Yeah, India will rule the world with its spiritual strength and with its style of relating to the people, which is what democracy is all about.
But we see the corruption is rising day by day, selfishness rising day by day in a common man, not just the politicians. In a common people, they are become corrupt. They are becoming selfish.
Because we are drifting towards a materialistic culture which has come from the West. We are so enamored of many things that are Western, but which are degrading to the human soul and spiritual
So when
pursuits.
this shift will happen?
A shift will happen, I think, when Rahu Dasha is due to start.
When is
Now we are in Chandra Dasha, then Kuja Dasha, 7 years, but I don't remember the exact dates. So another maybe 10 years. So we have to go back to our cultural roots. Only then, corruption, everything will go down. You know, in even about 100 years ago, or maybe 75, 50 years ago, in every village there would be a temple and there would be a pravachana on certain days, and people would gather there to listen to the pravachanas or spiritual discourses. And in these, the people delivering the discourse, they would talk about Papa and Punya, and Papa Biti was instilled in the hearts of people, so they would refrain from doing certain kinds of acts. But now all that is gone. They're exposed only to TV culture and the serials, where in the serials everyone is plotting against everyone else, right? So
the
until
karma phala siddhanta is almost vanished in the minds of
minds of people, but it will come back with a bang, when they suffer a little. ಒಂದು ಎರಡು ಏಟ್ ಬೀಳಬೇಕು ಆವಾಗೇನೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗೋದು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ.
Coming back to some of the individual level, what we as individuals can do. We spoke of how the government can institutionalize. Fine. If I have to, for myself and my future generation, bring in a sense of astrological thinking in our decision making. What are all the areas, madam, that you think we should start off with? It can be probably, I don't know, but education, health, so on and so forth, marriage. What can be done and how it can be done?
It depends upon the nature of problem you are facing or you're fearing will materialize in your life. Based on the planetary positions relating to that particular problem which is reflected in the chart, you can take precautionary measures. And these precautionary measures of three kinds. One is mantra, mani and aushadha. That is prayer, gemstones and medical treatment. And always it is never diverse from common sense also and attitudes. So depending upon what you are looking for, let us say you want to start a business, then if your chart should show certain combinations which are known as dhana yogas, then we can say you can proceed with your plans and all that. If the dhana yogas are absent, then it is better not to venture into business but look for employment. If the chart is good, you will do very well as an employee also, working for some company and all that. So that is how we can make decisions.
Okay, on the one hand, we saw what government can do. On the other hand, if we would want to scientifically take the astrological science to the people, what needs to be done as individuals or small organizations that they can take it?
No, my father, the late Dr. B.V. Raman, he had formed an all India body called the Indian Council of Astrological Sciences. And now it has almost 50 or 51 chapters across the country, where astrology is being taught on a syllabus that was framed by father during his lifetime in consultation with some of his contemporaries. And lots of people who are very well read with high academic qualification, they are attending these classes. So this is one part of the, area where astrology is receiving proper treatment and spreading its what would you say, spreading its influence in a positive way amongst the educated people. Beyond that, it is only the government, we should give it official recognition, and it should make part of the studies, maybe in high school, introduce them to subject, introduce them children to the subject with some respect, and not dismiss it as superstition. Then I think it will gradually evolve into a very helpful tool of foreknowledge.
Okay, a bit more interesting for the common man, but of the country as well. How do we see the horoscopes of the two key people of the country today, Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi?
Well, I've dealt with it several times in a magazine. I've always said Rahul Gandhi should stop aspiring for something that is beyond the reach of his horoscope. Regarding the Prime Minister, he has a very good horoscope and a very good mind also. Horoscopically I'm speaking, it's not my personal opinion. And also the dashas are also good. Dasha means time periods, they are good. And so I think he will do very well in the future also. But coming to, of course it's too premature to say anything about the next general elections. It depends who the other contenders are, it will depend on their horoscopes also. But the fact Narendra Modi is in Moon Dasha, Chandra Dasha, with Chandra getting Neechabhanga from several quarters, shows he has terrible adversaries and enemies. And of the neechest kind, you can say. Of course, not an English term, the most depraved kind of enemies also. But because of the Neechabhanga, he will come out unscathed, is what I can say.
When we speak of astrology and research, as you were talking about, Dr. Murali Manohar Joshi tried doing it at some point in time, but there was a massive backlash.
Yeah.
So now if we have to reintroduce it, but without getting the backlash, but also getting the buy-in of most of the people, if not all, how should we go about it? The government should accept it. How should they go about doing it?
There is no other way except to bring it into school level education, and there will always be opposition to it because there are many vested interests. For example, let us say the space organization has planned an event for a particular date, and the astrological indication is it's not going to succeed on that date, and it's being funded, crores of rupees going into it. Vested interests don't want to lose that, funding. So naturally they may resist the astrological indication and therefore astrology. So these are all matters which have to be overcome, and it may take a long time, but I think eventually it will succeed because finally truth succeeds.
Do you know of any cases wherein astrology is used during very senior level, for example, hiring, the way you look at marriage, compatibility, so on and so forth? Let's say some big company wants to hire a CEO or a very senior level position. Is there any role for astrology?
Definitely you can compare the charts of all the applicants and choose the one that has the best horoscope.
Have you had in your experience any such situations wherein
I have been approached by certain companies on whether to take a particular individual or not, not of all the applicants, and they have gone by what I have said with good results.
what is your key focus advice, if I can use the word, for youth? I mean, for whatever it is, they have been brought up on the fact saying that either they don't know the index system and definitely not astrology as a highly regarded domain. What is your one word value advice to them?
Yeah, see, if believing in something can be described as superstition, rejecting something also without studying it is superstition. So I tell them that study the subject diligently, and after 3-4 years you have to spend time on it. You can't study it for a month and say, oh, it's nonsense.
But they don't even sleep for one night.
Yeah, you study it diligently as you would do for a graduate degree and all, and then you will really understand its potential.
One quick clarification. Eastern astrology or the Indian astrology versus the Western astrology. How close are they? How different are they?
See, Indian astrology has come to us from the great rishis of India, who were not only spiritual giants but also great intellectual giants. And whatever they said has always been truth, close to truth or truth itself. And their only intention in sharing their knowledge with the future generations was Loka Kalyana, never, individual or national or community. So that is how, we see astrology in India and how it has developed in India. But in the West, whatever they have, it has come from the Greeks to them. And it is very superficial. If you compare an astrological analysis from a Western astrological point of view and from an Indian astrological point of view, you will see the Western is very shallow. Those that follow Western astrology, the results are very shallow. But here in Indian astrology, in Jyotisha, what you can make out from the chart is something unbelievable, especially when it comes to the state of mind of someone, like identify potential criminals and killers. All that Western astrology cannot help. All that it does is it is more or less a commercial venture there. But many Westerners are now veering towards Indian astrology or Jyotisha. So that is the good thing about it.
Also, we get to hear people speak of some of the Muslim astrologers. They call them Yavanas, Yavanacharyas, or whatever. What is your view on that?
See, there is one text called Yavana Jataka, and the Yavanas are always associated with Greeks. But in one of the texts it says, the ruler for, the deity for Mercury is Vishnu. Now which Greek astrologer or Greek individual or Muslim individual would say that? So Yavanacharyas may be those who were living somewhere in the border areas of India and basically from India only.
They were at the cusp of two different knowledge bases,
Regions,
so
you
to
can
speak.
say.
Regions. Okay. And one question, especially as we come closer to 8th March. Stri Jatakam is considered to be one specific domain with a different view of looking. For example, a prosperity of woman or a power in a woman would probably denote that a husband would have been the king or a big merchant, so on. Times have changed, things have changed. A lot of women CEOs, women political leaders, women prime ministers, so on and so forth. So then, what exactly, apart from the physiological differences, so in which case, health-wise, maybe Stri Jatakam can still be separate. Do you still believe that Stri Jatakam needs to be looked at in a different format?
See, all astrological interpretation must be on the basis of Kala, Desha and Vartamana. So, applying it to present conditions, you have to make suitable adaptations, that is all. So, if the ascendant is strong and the 10th house is strong, then you can say the individual lady, she will do very well in her career. That is according to present times. Once upon a time, all the yogas were enjoyed only by the men, and most times the women were confined indoors. But now also you can say if the 7th house is strong, then the husband will also be prosperous or a political leader or do well as an industrialist and so on. It's only you have to adapt the ancient rules to present times. They're not very rigid. For example, there are combinations which say if Mars is aspecting your 2nd house, then your kosha, that is treasury, and your go downs will be destroyed by fire, by thieves. Now you can adapt it to modern times and say when Mars and Rahu are involved in such a manner, then there is a likelihood of terrorists attacking the region or the country. It's only a matter of adaptation. And for that you have to take into account Samhita principles, where matters related to collective destinies are discussed. So all the rules hold good for all time. Only with some adaptation you can come up with very good results.
Any pointers that you want to give about other astrological organizations or individuals who are into astrology study, research, dissemination, and maybe that can help the country as a whole or the government as a whole to pick up cues and bring them on a common platform.
No, there are several astrologers who have approached the subject with great respect and they have very good academic backgrounds. For example, this Indian Council of Astrological Sciences in November 1998, in December 1998, father passed away. In November 1998, there was a conference at Kanpur. At that time, Dr. Raman nominated the High Court judge as the president, Justice S.N. Kapoor, and held the flag of the high caste high for almost 10 years after father's demise. So a judge is basically an academician at heart and has done a lot of research and trained lots of students in astrology research. After him we have Mr. A.B. Shukla, IAS retired, who is also doing very well, and he is very research oriented and of course a brilliant scholar. So, and there are many people like them in different chapters who are bringing credit to the subject and also training students in a very good manner. So, the movement for astrology, I can say it's picking up momentum, though I wish the momentum was even faster.
The very fact that a platform like Samvada wants to interview a astrology scholar like you speaks of the fact that there is a good amount of interest in the society and in the people who matter on policy and decision making. So to that extent, I think it's a good sign. As I said, we pray and hope that things become much better for astrology and the people who practice astrology.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time. Truly appreciate it.